Three, two, one, go. Hey guys, this is Bruce. Welcome to Convocourses podcast. Every week we talk about cybersecurity topics, mainly governance, risk, and compliance, which is my specialty. And this week is no different. What I would like to do is walk you guys through a book that I'm currently working on. If you didn't know, I still have a discounted book that me and the team got together on FISMA, Federal Information Security Modernization Act. It's a breakdown of a federal government regulation that is used to for compliance of information systems that are controlled and managed by the U.S. government. And what we've done is just simplified it, broke it down to things you really need to know, got straight to the point, and we do that in about a good 100 pages. It breaks it down, and there's no uh, legislative speech. There's no legalese in there. It's just straight to the point, what you need to know. And that's in the link that I have here, convocourses.net, to get that discount, still at like 99 cents. And the reason why I do that, just so you know, the value is high, relatively speaking, but it's a discount right now because I'm trying to get reviews. So if you're interested in doing reviews on books, you don't mind checking things out, you already read these books anyway, you're interested in it, or you just want to support me, go ahead and check the book out and give me a review. And that really helps out a lot. But today I'm talking about a whole nother book if you're interested in this. So this one is ISO 27001 that I'm working on. And I just want to kind of walk you through what I have going on right now, where I'm at with. It's not done yet. We're still working on it. Um, but let me show you what I've got so far. So on my screen here is the draft of ISO 27001 Information Security Management System Guide. And if you didn't know, this is like an international standard that is used mainly right now in EU. They use it quite a bit, but other countries use this as well, including the U.S. Organizations within the U.S. It's great international standard because it's one of the issues with some of the other standards is they focus so much on their own industry or their own government or whatever, like ISO 20. Like if you're talking about NIST 800, it's mainly for the U.S. government. It's really heavy duty because it's catering to Department of Defense and those kinds of organizations. And if you're talking about PCI DSS, that's mainly credit cards, retailers, things like that. I mean, that's this specialty. That's what it's supposed to be created by the credit card companies themselves. Then you have HIPAA, which is for healthcare industry. The ISO 27000 series focuses on an international standard. It is broad enough to where it can cover not just the EU, but other countries as well. So that's kind of what this book is about. Is focusing on that. I'm still in development on this, probably like 30 days out. I'm trying to make it as accessible as possible. That's why I've got some images in there. One of my content editors suggested I make it a little bit more fun, so that's why there's like pictures and stuff in there. And I'm still working on that. But let me show you where I get all this from. Where's my source documentation? I want to show you that because that's an important piece to this. So the source documentation comes from the actual ISO 27001 document. Let me show you how that looks. This is it right here. This is the actual ISO 27001, and you can buy. There's only one place to buy this from. One body owns this document, and this is an international body. It's somewhere out of Europe, I think out of UK. And this document is about. Here's one of the problems with this. This is the one I purchased, by the way. This is my personal, and I'm not allowed to like give this out. Like it's very proprietary and stuff. So what I'm showing you is about what I can show you, right? You got to buy it. And it's the problem with it is $130. And it's like a 20-page document. I'm not exaggerating. This is a $130 document that's 20 pages long, and it's supposed to be. This is the international standard. I was super surprised that it's so expensive and that it's got 20 pages in it. And I was like, what is this it? They don't expand on the sections. It's they leave a lot of room for you to expand on. So that's what I did. I took it and I expanded on it. And just let me I'm just kind of take you on like a journey through this document. So it has about 10 chapters, and those each of those 10 chapters covers some part, the major parts of the ISO 27001. It starts off with, of course, like the scope of this document and some of the terms and definitions. That stuff is not going to help you out much if you're talking about practical implementation of ISO 27001. Let's get right into the meat. The meat starts off with chapter 4, which is the context of the organization. Then it goes into chapter 5, which is leadership. Then 6, which is planning. 7, which is support. 8, operations. 9, performance evaluation. And then 10, improvement. Each one of these are clauses that an organization is supposed to meet. These clauses are basically statements that break down what you're supposed to have. I'll give you a specific example. So in clause 4, it's talking about the context of the organization. Now, what is that? So the organization has to understand what their business is, what their needs are, what the scope of the information security system that they're going to develop. What are they protecting? What do they have, and what are they protecting? That's it. That's what it's talking about, right? And if you want a correlation for this, if you understand some of the other standards and frameworks, a good correlation would be the NIST 800's risk management framework. 800 NIST 837 talks about this in its preparation phase and its categorization phase. Like what is this system? What does the organization need to protect on this particular system? And with the NIST 800, they kind of cover the same thing with context of the organization. What do we have? How important is our information? Does that make sense? Like if it's very important, if it's classified, right, we have to have a certain level of protection. Whereas if it's publicly available information, the security is a little lower. So that's what you're talking about in clause 4 of this document. This is the kind of covers that I have in the book that I'm creating right now. It talks about, look, here's what you really need to know, right? In plain English, I'm not going too far off into academia. I'm kind of trying to keep it to where it's something that you can use by expanding on exactly what they're talking about and then giving examples and things like that. And then giving some of my own personal experience and perspective on the whole thing. And so that's kind of what I'm hitting it at. And the way I break this down, let me kind of give you a depiction of how this is broken down. It's broken down to line it up with what's called the plan, do, check, act. So in the planning phase, backing up from that, there's a leadership phase. Like the leaders of the organization need to have full buy-in on this process, because if the leadership and if you've been in IT, if you've been in cybersecurity for some time, you know that you're not going to get much done without the leaders of that organization. The leaders of the organization have to buy into putting security into the culture of the organization. They have to back up whatever's going on with solutions, especially if money is involved. And that's where the first step is clause 4, which is organizational context, and then clause 5, which is leadership. Is leadership fully read in? Do they know what's going on? Are they backing up what's about to happen? That's where you start. And then you get into the plan, the do, the check, the act. And each one of those has a clause associated with it. So in the book, what I do is go clause by clause to explain to you what exactly the ISO 27001 documentation is talking about, and then expand and then give you even more comprehensive breakdown of what they're actually talking about, so that you can understand what it is, how to implement this, how to interpret this stuff for yourself. And that's not to say this is not a replacement for the ISO 27001, that 20-page document, but it does expand on it quite a bit. Like their book is 20 pages. This book is almost 200 pages. So it goes into greater detail when it's all said and done. It's going to go into greater detail about how this all works out. and how you can implement it in your organization. So that's the book right there. Let me just kind of give you a little bit more of a view into this book that we're writing. And I've got some notes in here. Still, I'm still working on it. I'm still adding more. I'm still actually writing this book, but this will be out probably within the next 30 days. Gonna have to have it a little bit more into the editing portion of this book and going through everything. But here it is right here. It's coming soon. Like I said, 30 days if I'm lucky, if I can get it out. Because it's going through like I must be in like this must be like the fourth draft of this book. I mean, I've had to rewrite this thing to make it more simple and to get straight to the point and make it as effective as the first couple books on the NIST 800 where it was very, very focused. If you read my books, it's like, here's what you do. You do this, you do this, you do this. Here's why you need to do this. Here's why you need to focus on this. Here's some of the gotchas. That's kind of what this book is doing, but it's taking the ISO 27001 document, that 20-page document, and expanding it out, giving you examples of what they mean and things like that. So that's the book, ISO 27001. If you don't know, if you're not on my newsletter, if you don't follow me on a regular basis, listen, I give out free stuff. I'll spend months and months writing something, and I'll give it to you guys for free. Like the first week or 2 weeks, it'll be free or 99 cents. You can grab it. But then after that, it's like 30, 40 bucks on Amazon or on print copy. So right now, I'm telling you, like, this book is coming. The other book that we just released is FSMA Compliance. Right now, it's 99 cents on KDP. Go check it out. We've got some updates that are going to come out on that book, but right now, 99 cents. Go grab it. And then the actual audio book is being created right now. So keep your eye on that. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I've been in this field for a long time, and I've had to fend for myself, and I've had to learn all this stuff by just reading the federal documents and the directives that come directly from the legislation. And the way they write stuff is just it's really bad. They don't write it for normal people who are in this field. They don't write it for the layperson. They write it for academia. They write it for PhDs. You're not trying to get a thesis. You're trying to secure systems, right? You're not trying to get a PhD. You're not trying to write your thesis for your PhD. We're not trying to get a doctorate. This is for people who are in the field who have to do this work. That's who I write for, because that's where I'm at. And that's when you're in the weeds trying to get this shit done, and you're reading these documents and you got to read something 15 times to understand it. It's like, this isn't useful to me. Even if you understand the theory of what they're saying, you don't need theory. You need them to tell you what's going on in plain English. And that's what I'm trying to do in my books. Is I'm trying to tell you, here's what you do. Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. This other shit, don't worry about it. Don't worry about this. You're probably never going to see this. Forget this. If you want to know more, go read this academic white paper on the shit. But here's what you really need. So GRC is kind of lacking in that department. And I think that's why my books are doing well. It's because GRC books and content doesn't cater to the layperson who's actually doing this stuff. It's catering to people from academia, people who talk about theory, CEOs who are running 2 different companies they're not even doing the stuff. They're not in the weeds on the stuff like you and I are. We are in the weeds. We're having to work with the IT department. We're having to work with issues with implementation because you can't put this on this legacy system. We're the ones wrestling with these challenges. And so what I try to do is write to that audience. And so that's what my books are all about. I'm writing to you guys, us in the field who have to do this stuff. So that's what's going on with my books. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read some comments and get you guys 2 cents on all of this. All right. William, he says, "Hi, Bruce. What is it like going from your first IT job to what you're doing now in compliance? What was it like going from IT?" So my experience is probably different because I started making the transition when I was in the military. I was in the Air Force, and I started off doing, I was a help desk guy. When I was in, they would have us do help desk first to kind of introduce you to the field. You'd be fixing, you'd be a tier one person who's going filling out tickets. Like somebody would have a problem with their laptop or desktop, and then you would go to you would travel to their desk and then try to fix what's going on. Sometimes it'd be simple things like their network interface card was not working properly, or they needed to have a replacement, and the software needed to be uninstalled and reinstalled. It'd be stuff like that, right? Basic stuff that you could figure out. Basic troubleshooting, things like that. So what happened to me to get into compliance was I was kind of pushed into it. And this is how most of us get this compliance type work. People don't normally seek it out. Maybe nowadays they do. I'm not sure, but a lot of times what happens is that you're pushed into it. You're an IT guy, you're doing networking stuff, you're doing help desk stuff or something like that, and you've been doing it for a couple years. And then like, hey, we need somebody to do this documentation stuff over here. And a lot of times the leadership does not know, don't understand it. They don't know what's going on, and they don't have time to sit there and get in the weeds on it. They just know something needs to be done, and it's very important because they need to get an authority to operate. They need to get compliance on some standard. They know it's important. So they come to you and they say, look, we need you to focus on this one thing. There's this policy, and we're supposed to do a system security plan, or when I was doing it was called a system security authorization agreement. There's some kind of security document that puts in text everything that's going on with the security of your system. Sometimes it's called an SOA, and ISO 27001 is called a statement of authority. In NIST 800 is called a NIST, in ATO a lot of times, in DoD is called an authority to operate. I've heard it called an ISO 27001 compliance. There's some kind of compliance that you need to get for some higher department that's how they authorize you to operate or whatever. They figure that once they get that piece of paper saying that you've done risk analysis, you've done everything you're supposed to do, you've got all your documentation, then they can sign off and say, okay, we can take the risk on this. And it has different names, right? Depending on what you're doing. I was forced into it. I was happy just doing networking stuff or doing regular IT work, doing help desk stuff. And then they put me into it and they said, hey, we need you to do this documentation. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And they're like, look, I don't fully know what it is, but read this document. That's what they did. Here's the policy, read it, do everything that they say in this policy. And that's what I did. I went into it and it was boring. What was the transition like? It sucked. I didn't want to do it. It was absolutely boring. I had to read a bunch of federal documents. I had to figure out like what the hell they were talking about. Sometimes I didn't know what they were talking about. So I had to cross-reference that with another document they were doing, because the way they write is so dumb. It's just so ridiculous. Like, they don't write to normal people. They don't write to the people who actually have to do this work. They write it to it's like Congress is writing it to the Senate or something. It's so dumb. And when you read it, you're like, what am I reading here? Why doesn't this make any sense? It's because they're writing to each other. Their audience is each other, right? Or some director or something who's been doing this in theory for 15 years or something. And so I'm reading that kind of stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck? What am I reading? And as I was reading it, start to understand what they were talking about. I started to get it. It started to click. I started to put two and two together. It started to make more sense. And then I created the first document, like the first system security plan it wasn't called that at the time, but I wrote one and I had a template, and I gave it to assessors came and they read it. They were like, yo, this is pretty good. And they understood what I wrote. There were some problems with it. They said, well, you need this, you need that. I was like, okay, fine. And we wrote that, like, procedures or whatever to do X, Y, and Z. But that's how I got into it. It was boring. It was a lot of reading. It was a lot of studying. It was trying to figure out new terminology. But in the end, I got it. I started to understand why. The most important thing is to understand why it's being done. Because a lot of IT people, That's one thing they can't wrap their head around. Why are they always asking, why are we doing so much extra documentation? I've got these other things to do. Like the real, if we want to secure these systems, we need to put these controls in place. We need to update these security patches. That's what we need to do. Not doing this documentation shit, right? We're wasting our time doing this. Why are you having me do all this extra stuff? So that reason is super important. And that was the one unknowns that I didn't understand until I really got deep into it. And what it is there's so many things happening in an environment. There's so many changes. There's so many, you can't possibly capture it all. The guys who are actually implementing the security, the actual dudes who are uploading the patches or uh, updating the virus signatures or fixing things on the servers or whatever, they only see one piece of the whole picture. In reality, when you start to see the big picture, you start to see that's not really where the main weak link is on security. One of the I'll give you two main links that happen. Main weak links that happen. One is users not being trained. Users clicking on links that they don't know. They just don't know any better. They're just there to do their job, right? Maybe they're a visual artist and they come in, they got their laptop, they got all the stuff. They get an email from outside source and then they click on the link and then it downloads some virus. And it's not even a virus. It's an APT. It's an advanced persistent threat from another government that allows them access into your network. All they did was click a link, and it's all because they didn't have the education. The technical guys implementing security, the guys who run on the firewall, the guys who are doing the really advanced stuff, they're not really thinking about the random user who bypasses all the security features they put on by clicking a link and downloading some software that runs in the background that's now infiltrated your entire network. What I'm saying is there's a huge big picture that's happening here, and you as a GRC person, as a person doing compliance, you're having to look at the big picture. You're not just looking at the single slice of them implementing patches. So one of the main things, like I said, was users. One of the biggest weak links is that users not knowing what the hell's going on. So it's called security training, security awareness training. Huge. It's overlooked by a lot of organizations. Another one would be another big one is baseline. A lot of organizations, especially large environments, don't have a good baseline. Really, there's always problems with the baseline, but the weaker the baseline is, the more vulnerabilities there are. And when I say baseline, that means, do they know what's on their network and do they control what's on their network? Because if they're constantly getting new software that people can just randomly download, or new systems that you could just plug in, or you can just take a thumb drive and plug it into the network, or nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what kinds of workstations. Nobody knows what kinds of servers are out there. Nobody knows anything. There's nothing written down. That is not good. And some of the worst environments, when I was at Verizon doing cybersecurity risk analysis, one of the biggest problems you see among organizations is that they don't have a good baseline. They don't know what they have out in the field. They don't know what, and that's what assessments are for, to figure out, okay, well, what do we know? Are there any unknown unknowns here? Are there any things that we know you guys don't know about, we don't know about? Let's discover it, right? So that's those two big things, as you as a compliance person start to get this big picture of what security really means to an organization. And once you start looking at that big picture, making the shift from being playing whack-a-mole, fixing problems or finding vulnerabilities and patching them and stuff, playing whack-a-mole, to go into a big picture and saying, okay, how can we come together and fix this organization's problems? That's how the CEOs and upper level management have to think all the time. So you're having to think at their like at that level, like it's a big ass chessboard, and where can we fix this stuff? And what you start to see is there's so much risk. The best that you can do, you're not going to 100% close every vulnerability. The best you can do is manage the risk, manage the level of risk that you have. So the biggest transition going from an IT person to compliance, what I do now is my my view of an organization has changed. It's not just okay, we're going to patch these things. It's what is the total risk of the organization and how can we fix it going forward? What can we do as a team to fix this thing? It's a great question, man. Great question. Let me see. I'm going to TikTok and answering some questions. Somebody said, "Can you elaborate on the federal documents that you had to read, NIST or other documents?" So when I was doing this, temp, when I was doing it, it was a long time ago. I could specifically tell you, like it was the federal directives was at the time it's called. Oh my god, it was a long time ago. 8500. It was one before 8500. It was it was a DOD directive, and I was reading DOD directives. Okay, I can't remember the exact. It was a 5000 series. It was DOD 5500. DOD 5500. Now, see, now you're gonna make me Google it. It's a very old directive. Just to give you an idea of kind of what kind of documents I was reading. There was a DOD 5500 or 5000, DOD 5000. I'm looking it up right now because I don't remember. It was 20 years ago, about 20 years ago. DOD directive 5000. Oh man, that's Operation Test Environment Acquisitions. I'm on the right track. DOD 5000 acquisition, DOD 5000 series, DOD 8500. That's what it was. So I was reading something called DOD 8500. Department of Defense had something called DOD 8500. And it's since evolved or changed. I haven't done this specific thing in a long, long time. But they had something called DOD 8500. And then there was another one before that I cannot remember what that one was, but it was like 5500 or 50. I don't remember. But it was a directive that was very high level and was based off of federal a bunch of federal laws. And I was reading through that, and it's really written for upper level management. It's not written for people in the weeds. And it's telling you like what's supposed to happen. And the organization has to line themselves up with what is needed. I'll give you a specific example. So that one of the things that was needed was what was called a System Security Authorization Agreement. And we didn't have one. So I had to write one from scratch. Like I literally had no template, nothing. I had to take a white Word document, WordPad, and write down everything that it had. And it had things like describe the system's name, right? So I'll start off simple like that. What is the scope of the system? For that, I had to do research. I had to talk to the network engineers. I had to talk to the server guys. I had to talk to different people to put it all together in a way that was understandable to our leadership. And then it goes into greater detail that took a lot more time. Like, what are the security features of the system? Do you have access controls in place? Do you have access management documentation? Do you have identification and authentication? Do you have stuff like that? You have to address each one of those. And I had to, some of it I knew, some of it I had documentation already. I said, oh yeah, we have this. We reference it in this other procedure. This is how we do it. You have to have a CAT card to get into the system. At the time, we didn't have CAT cards to get in the system. So we had username, passwords. But so I had to read the directive that gave me guidance on where to look. And then turns out we had some really old policy. So I had to read through the policy, and the policies would be like, you must use a 14 character password. I'm like, we're not using a 14 character password. So I'd go back to our organization and say, hey, we need, I'm just giving you examples. This is not, at the time, we weren't even using those. I would go back to the organization and say, hey, this document says we're supposed to be using these kind of passwords. Like, we're not using that. What do we? And then they'd be like, okay, like maybe we'll change it, but for now, we'll identify it as a finding. And so I would identify that as a finding. So when the assessors came, they read through my document. They were able to figure out, okay, I see what you mean. Like, so you guys don't have this kind of password. All right, we'll annotate that. Are you guys planning to fix that? I'm like, yeah, I talked to this or that person. We're planning on fixing it here. Here's where we document it, where we're going to fix it. Here's how we're going to fix it and when. Here's the point of contact to fix it. We've already fixed it on these 3 systems right here. It was stuff like that. But the initial reading was the actual directive from the Department of Defense. And it might be different. Like if you work for Department of the Navy, you probably have something for them. If it's for the Army, it's going to be AR 25, whatever the fuck it is. I don't remember off the top of my head. And it's like AR-2, A25-2. Yeah, that's what it is. So each organization has their own like security policy that breaks it all down, and then it tells you kind of what you're supposed to have. And I'm telling you about stuff that's really old. Like your organization, look, if you want guidance, look to your security policy. That security policy is going to direct you on what's supposed to happen. And if it's outdated, you need to update it to figure out like what are the things you're not doing and how can you fix it. So you want to use that security policy as kind of like a compass on which way to go, if that makes sense. Can you recommend certifications for cloud security? Yes, I would highly recommend the AWS cloud certification, starting off with the foundation and all the way up. And then secondly, you might want to do the Azure has a cloud certification, AZ 900, I think it is. I keep in mind, I'm not a cloud guy. I have none of these certifications. The reason why I'm recommending them to you is because those vendor level certifications are right now the most popular, they're going to cover the most marketability for you, because those guys hold together. Amazon and right now, Amazon and Microsoft have probably 50% of the market share or more for cloud technologies. But there's others, like Google has some, Oracle has some, and other organizations. But those top 2 that I mentioned, those ones right have most of the market share. So I would recommend those 2. If you wanted something that was not non-vendor specific, you probably want to go to ISO 27000. You probably want to go to ISC2. Square has one called they have a cloud computing certification, and that one is vendor neutral, meaning no vendor actually owns that one. So that would be the best one for vendor neutrality. If you didn't want to go Amazon or Microsoft or Google. So I got accepted into WGU for cybersecurity. Is that a good idea? WGU, yeah, absolutely. Like WGU is fire. Like it's an accredited college. They're not trying to break. They're not trying to break the bank on you. So yeah, that. I think that's a really good solution. A lot of people who I've talked to have had great things to say about WGU. They also have a certification program on the side. Looks like they have a pretty decent master's and bachelor's curriculum. So yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it's once you get that piece of paper, it's going to open up a lot of doors for you. The only thing I would say is don't start. I mean, don't wait till you get the paper, right? Start right now. Start right now in putting yourself out there. Start right now in getting experience. If you can work for WGU or like a working student program, do that. If you can work in your local, whatever local venue you're working at, even if it's at your actual job, if you can do IT now, start now. If you can right now, you could, there's no excuse. You can actually start putting yourself on LinkedIn, on Dice, on Monster, on all these job aggregators to to advertise yourself as an IT professional. It's almost like you got to be an IT professional before you're doing an IT professional work. I know that sounds crazy, but you need to start thinking that way. And you need to put that stuff on your profile online and then start reaching out to people to get yourself in the door to become an apprentice or an intern right now. Don't wait until you get the piece of paper in your hand. That piece of paper is not magic. You want experience over everything else. And use the program to the fullest example by starting off by making part of your goal to not only get experience, not only get the degree, but get experience and get a certification. That's what you want to do. Okay, I got some questions and comments and stuff before I even started. Let me see here. Look for those. And I got one from Instagram. Hey, Bruce, appreciate what you do. My question is for what would be a good resource for developing a contingency plan that can meet DoD compliance for an organization? So the first place you probably want to start with finding a compliance contingency plan would be, for guidance, would be the NIST 800 CP controls. NIST 800 53 has CP controls. Let me see if I can find it to show you. And I got a couple other places you can resources you can use. NIST 800. And the reason why I tell you to go to the NIST CP controls is because NIST CP controls is going to give you good guidance on what you're supposed to do. It's going to tell you what you're supposed to do. So here, let me show my screen. For those who are listening to me, I'll explain what we're looking at. So right now I'm looking at the NIST 800 publication, 853, revision 5. And this has every control family and control enhancement, has all controls in it. The ones that he's asking me about is contingency planning, which is CP controls. CP, I think it's CP2, but I could be wrong. CP-2. And right now I'm searching through the document for CP-2. And it should take me, CP-2 is contingency plan. Holy shit, I got that right. That's crazy. I've been doing this too long, man. Contingency plan. Okay. So this right here breaks down what the organization wants to see. And the reason this is still good for DoD, because DoD is using these exact controls, by the way. They might be on CP, they might be still on Rev 4, but I don't think Rev 4 and Rev 5 are different for CP controls. I think it's CP controls actually remain the same for the most part. All right, so let me just give you an example. So this is saying that the control is the organization is supposed to develop a contingency plan for the system that identifies mission essential or business essential functions, provides recovery objectives and restoration priorities, addresses contingency roles, responsibilities. What it's getting at is the who, what, when, where, and why. It's breaking down everything you're supposed to see, and then it has a discussion about it. It says the contingency plan for a system is part of the overall program for achieving continuity of operations for the organization's mission or business functions. So what happens if if that system goes down? That's what they're getting at. and it's going to address who, what, when, where, and why when that system goes down. What do we do when the system goes down? What is our backup plan? Who is the main point of contact if that system goes down? How long can it be down? Where can we back it back? Where do we back it up? And where can it come up again if we have an alternate site? Explaining that. And you have to have an entire program that explains this. Like a whole, this is not you doing it by yourself. One of the things that you got to get out of your mind as a cyber GRC professionals that you're not, this is not, as much as they try to play it off and try to blame you for stuff because you didn't fill out this document or that, but this is something the whole organization has to do, because you by yourself can't determine that this site A, B, and C needs to have a backup plan that goes to site B, C, D, and E. That's something that's beyond your pay grade. Like the organization has to figure out, okay, if this goes down, here's what we're going to do, right? Everybody together has to come together and say, how do we do this? It's your job to report the findings. So you'll go to them and say, okay, if site A goes down, what are we going to do? Oh, it's not documented. We need to document it. So you'd report that up the chain. Say, hey, we don't have a contingency plan for this. So the best place you're going to go to, aside from the NIST 800 53 CP2 that breaks all of it down, is the actual CP contingency plan documentation that they already have in place. They should already have an old, no matter how old it is, even if it's back 10 years, they should already have something already in place. Now, what you can do is, if you're the oncoming GRC ISO, you can come in, get the old document, and build from their old document. Like, even if it's use their new template, build from their old document and start writing it. And then vet it. Make sure that you're not in a vacuum writing it by yourself and then getting it signed by somebody and nobody's peer reviewed it. Nobody's looked it over. Nobody's looked over your shoulder and say, hey, that's wrong. It's not site A, it's site B. Like, you need somebody who actually is in the field to look at it. Somebody who's actually doing the contingency plan to look at your document that you wrote, or to help you write it, or write them their damn selves. Use the old document, rewrite what they said, update because some of the technologies and procedures will have changed, and then get it peer reviewed by somebody who's actually doing it, or have them write it and you rewrite it. Something, because it's not a one person job. So where can you find templates? There's a couple places. The best place is to find templates within your organization, because they're going to have the approved template, especially if you work in any federal organization. They're not going to just allow you to make your own template. They have their own. Find out what the template is in your organization. Somebody knows. Talk to your boss. Talk to your main point of contact for the documentation, and ask them what's their template for our SOPs, for our contingency plan. Have we had a contingency plan before? Can we use the same template that we used before? Because some organizations use spreadsheets. Some organizations use Word, PDFs. Some of them have a website that they use. Sometimes they use some combination of all of those things. You got to use whatever template they're using. That's the best place that you can look. But if you don't have any of that, and you're writing from scratch, and you don't have guidance, and your organization is having to do this from scratch for whatever reason, there's a couple of great resources. One of them is the FedRAMP site. The FedRAMP site FedRAMP is mainly for, just so you know, is mainly for cloud computing for federal systems. But the FedRAMP site is one of few sites that still has great downloadable templates that you can use. And I believe, let me just show you guys my screen here. It's fedramp.gov, and they have a bunch of templates that are based on Word, are based on spreadsheets. I'm going to just type in contingency plan. I believe they have a contingency plan document, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, didn't. Okay, here we go. We have something here. It just popped up. Contingency plan. They have continuous monitoring. Maybe they don't have a contingency plan one. Contingency plan. Nope, doesn't look like they have one. Keep on looking here. while that site is all right. No, I don't see a template for that, but they have templates for a lot of things. Contingency. Actually, I think they have one on the NIST 800 site. Let me see. If you go to nist.gov, I'm on csrc.nist.gov, and I'm going to type in contingency plan. I believe they have a pretty good contingency plan. I believe these guys have one. Yeah, they have. Okay, so there's further contingency plan guidance, by the way. NIST 800-34 is actually a contingency plan guide for federal information systems. So that's another place you can go to. I'm actually looking for a template on it. And I know that they have one. Excuse me. So if you can't find one on this site, I actually have some on my site on convocourses.com that are just templates that you can download, a bunch of templates actually. But the best source is from the actual government. The actual government sites will be the best ones that you can, because that's where I get my stuff from anyway. Yeah. So there's templates here that you can get outside of your organization, right? The best sites are going to be from the actual government sites. All right. So I hope I answered that question. William said, I bought your new FSMA book. Thank you. Oh, thanks so much for that purchase, man. I appreciate you. If you guys didn't know, right now for a limited time, I have discounted FSMA book. I'm looking for reviews. That's why it's discounted right now, for it temporarily discounted while I'm getting reviews and getting people to buy it, stuff like that. It's a promo price, 99 cents, limited time. And you can actually become one of my advanced readers and check out some of my ebooks and audiobooks for free if you're an advanced reader whose job it is to do comments. How do you get more hands-on experience on NIST publications and creating documentation? That's a great question. So, question I got from TikTok was, how do you get experience doing this documentation? Where do you even start creating these documents? So if you happen to already be on the help desk doing any kind of IT whatsoever, chances are you've held, modified, or read a procedure, a policy, a work instruction. At some point, you've had your hand on some kind of user manual or work instruction or policy or procedure. So you have some idea what they look like, right? In your organization, if you've done it at several organizations, you know that they look a little bit different. They're on different templates. They have different levels of standards. They have different levels of quality. They're on PDF. Sometimes they're on Word documents. Sometimes they're on websites. It depends on how the organization puts them out, right? But your question is, how do you get experience? So number one, you have exposure to them. So you know you have some idea how they look. If you've worked on help desk for any number of months, at some point, you will have the opportunity to write a procedure, a work instruction, or maybe even a policy. And all of those are the types of documents that I write. That's GRC documentation. The confusion and the ignorance about this, the thing that people just don't know, is that all of us have some level of exposure to GRC stuff. You just don't know. You just didn't know that you have it. From healthcare industry to financial industry to the government, all of us have exposure to it, whether you know it or not. And I'll give you an example. If you're in the nursing, if you're a nurse, if you're a CNA, if you're a doctor, if you're a medical biller, you know what HIPAA is. you know what the hell HIPAA is. And chances are you have more exposure to it than I do. And I've been doing this 20 years. HIPAA is actually a little slice of GRC. I mean, it's actually the main slice of GRC if you're in the healthcare industry. It's everything. Um, an example of writing documentation for GRC would be if you had to write, if you had some coworkers and you had to explain to coworkers over and over again certain little things that they're supposed to do with GRC, like, hey, don't write the patient's full social security number on this document. Hey, make sure that if you have their documentation, it's in a folder that's covered up because you don't want it just on people's desk, right? Just basic things like that. After a while of saying this over and over again, you probably should write an instruction and say, look, here's the basic things you need to know about HIPAA. Guess what? You just had experience. That is experience writing something, documenting a procedure or a work instruction that is compliance with GRC. NIST publications is for mainly for federal, state, and high-level companies. Will use NIST 800 or NIST CSF. And it's the same thing. So if you had to explain over and over again to one of your coworkers over and over again, and then finally you're like, you know what, we should really write this down. I'm gonna make a work instruction and we're gonna pass it around via email. But every time a new person comes, here's the work instruction on how to do X. That's something that's part of one of the security controls. It might have been, here's how you set up an account. Here's what you need to do for your username and password. Make sure you do these steps right here. That's NIST 800 53 controls. If it's dealing with authentication, then you're talking about IA controls. So you just wrote something for IA controls. If it was dealing with audit logs, here's how you turn on the audit logs. Here's how you turn off the audit logs. Here's what every system needs to have if you're working on Macs doing the audit logs. You just wrote something for AU controls. You see what I'm getting at? There's security features that all of us have to deal with on a regular basis, but you don't know that you're even doing them. All of us are subject to these NIST laws, whether you know it or not. And without these standards and frameworks, we'd be back in the 90s getting hacked by other governments. We still are being hacked by other governments, by the way. I mean, it hasn't gone away. It's just been slowed down a bit. So think about any time you've written anything for your organization, and there's a good chance that one might be one of the controls. The control families, let me show you how broad it is. It covers physical security. So anytime you've done anything on physical security, any kind of documentation on physical security, any kind of thing, and that's pretty rare. Most people don't have experience on that. But anytime you've written anything on personnel security, even more rare, right? If you've ever written anything about privacy, if you've ever written anything about, if you've ever done any kind of documentation or modified or had to review or monitor a document or procedure or work instruction about authentication, about identification and authentication, about access controls, about account sharing, about media protection, maintenance. That's also a control family. There's a whole control family on just maintenance of your security, of your, not even security, maintenance on any system. If you've ever done a ticket before, like if you ever had to create a ticket for, or respond to a ticket, or being a part of the ticketing program. If you've ever done configuration management, and you might not even know what that is, but you've probably done it 100 times. Configuration management is when an organization needs to change something. There's a change or a new software or something's happened within the organization, and everybody needs to get together, or a small group of people get together and say, they're asking questions like, hey, we want to see if we can get this new browser. We want to introduce it to the organization, Chrome. Chrome is a new browser. We normally use Internet Explorer or Firefox, and now we want to introduce Chrome or Mosaic or whatever new. So we're having this meeting to figure out if there's any objections to it. We're going to explain to you what's the scope of it. We're going to explain every place that we're going to put, where we're going to put it all. We're going to install it on these systems. They're explaining the who, what, when, where, and why of the change that's going to happen. And then they may be even talking about like where we're going to scan. Once we install it, we're going to scan it. Everybody needs to be on this version of it. If you've been a part of these meetings, this is called, there's a couple names for it. It could be a change request meeting, a change management meeting. It can be a configuration management meeting. But if you've ever been a part of those, that's experience doing NIST 800. If you had to write the minutes for it, if you sat in the meeting for it, that's actually NIST 800 experience. It's CM control experience. It's change request experience. That right there is part of NIST 800 family of controls. If you've ever written standard operating procedure before, standard operating system or work instruction, anything like that, even if it wasn't official, but you wrote it for your peers, you wrote it for everyone, you posted it on the internal network, all of those can be considered, especially if it involved the management, modification, or security of information, of sensitive information. You just got to know how to where it applies to the NIST 800 publications. And I'm telling you, there's not only physical controls, but there's configuration management controls. There's privacy based controls, PII. You've got PT controls. You've got you've got encryption based controls, SC controls, SI controls, and security for the integrity of the information, data at rest. If you've ever encrypted the data on it, if you've did any kind of work instruction, those are all examples of experience that you could write. If you've done any of that stuff, experience that you could put on your resume that you've already done. Now, if you've done none of that, you probably need some more experience in IT. If you've done none of that at all, like if you can't even think of even one thing you've done or any exposure you've had to anything I just said or any of the controls, and there's 18 different control families or 20, I can't remember. There's so many controls that I just don't think it's possible that you had no exposure to one of these documents that I'm talking about. Security policy. You can't even get into the building or have an account on these systems without having what's called user. You got to go through the rules that they tell you immediately. Listen, you can't go to these websites. Here's what you can do and you can't do on this system. You got to sign a user agreement. That right there has policies in it. That right there is a summary of the policies of the organization. So if you had any kind of exposure whatsoever, you have some idea of what I'm talking about. And the more years you have in IT, I guarantee you have exposure to an SOP. You've had to modify it. And that's the thing. If, like, let's say you didn't modify one. You've never changed one. You've never done any kind of alterations to any kind of work instructions. You've never written one, nothing. Why don't you write one? That's one way you can have experience. Like, let's say you have an SOP and you're like, man, how can I make this better? This is good, but I want to make it better. I want to put pictures in it. They have some grammar mistakes in here. That's one way that you could have experience doing writing to implement security controls on the organization by creating an SOP or fixing an SOP or a work instruction. That's how you can get experience. All right, let me see. Yeah, William said writing an SOP for others. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yo, Bruce, how do you feel about having lines of business credit with multiple institutions? That's exactly what I do for my business. I'm currently doing that. So What one thing I've learned is that the more resources you have for a business, the better. I do realize the dangers of having too much credit, and overextending yourself, and you should not do that. But you have to have some level of you got to take some level of risks. It takes money to make money. Big lesson. I come from absolute poverty. I come from not even wanting to spend $30 on anything because I don't want to lose my money. What I've learned is if you really want to if you really want to be successful, you can't be worried about losing money. You got to be willing to risk some money. You can't just risk your time. Like one of the mindsets you've got to release is that you can't be afraid to lose money. And the more risk you're willing to take, the more managed risk that you're willing to take with money, using it as leverage, the more chances of success you give yourself. Does that make sense? What I learned is like when I first started trying to do business, I was afraid to lose any money at all. And if I did, and I did, sometimes I would try, like, okay, I'll just spend this $100 and I'll try this thing. And it didn't work. I'm like, damn it, I lost $100. This shit didn't work. It was BS. They exaggerated. But what I've learned is you can't be afraid to fail. Like you have to keep going. And lines of credit is one way to fail, to fail and give yourself like some cushion to keep going. Because what it'll do is like you use the credit and then it gives you time. You got 30 days or whatever, 2 weeks or whatever to pay it back. And that's what I do with IT is I make all this money and then I'll just pay back the money that I risked. And then I didn't, might have lost some money, but I'm back. And now I can start again. Like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try this other thing. It gives me more opportunities to try things. And then you can't be afraid to like lose money. So I like the more lines of credit that I can get. I have to, of course, there's moderation, right? You don't want to go too crazy with it. But what I'll do is real estate's a big one. So right now I'm getting into that, and that is, Lord God, that's a lot of credit sometimes. It's scary, like when you first get into it, because you're talking about buying like a house, right? So you really gotta be careful with that. But that said, like if you use a proper amount of leverage, you can sometimes get in the deal, and then if it didn't work out, get out of it. And how much did you lose? Depends on the deal. But because I'm getting into real estate and I'm doing this kind of stuff here, I have to have separate lines of credit because the mortgage stuff and the real estate stuff is separate from what I'm doing here, which is more like like footloose and like it's like fast. This kind of digital marketing and stuff I'm doing, buying ads and stuff like that for books, and that stuff is just like every week, every month, just going, it's turning. But real estate, man, that's like that shit takes months sometimes to mature, and it's a whole different ball game. I would love to talk about that stuff one of these days on a separate channel and go into details. Right now, I'm kind of in the middle of learning it, so I really can't speak on it very well, as you can see. But I do multiple business credit lines of credit. I have two different main businesses, and then both of those have two different lines of credit. And sometimes one has two or three, one has two, stuff like that. So I do that. That's what I'm doing right now. It's working. Couple things, like you got to focus on like one thing at a time. You don't want to do too many things. You want to focus, get this thing to work, and then move on to something else. If you have extra income, once this one works and has passive income streams or has some kind of income, then you can move on to something else. Because I used to spread myself too thin. Anyway, different topic. More comments. How the hell did they fit 10 chapters in 20 pages? So Kirk Jr. is at the beginning of this, if you guys were late, I went through ISO 27001 and I was showing them what it looks like. The actual ISO 27001 is 10 chapters and it's 20 pages. And he's asking, how the hell did they do that? Like, how, especially with how, that's a great question, because how comprehensive can you be for an international standard to have 10 pages, 20 pages and 10 chapters? They're very brief. It's very brief and it's like a statement. You will do this. You will do that. Next chapter. You will do this and you will do that. And the next chapter is you will do this and then you will do, it's like that. Like it just goes like you will do A, B, C, D, and G. Next chapter, you'll do A, B, C, D, and like that. It will just, that's what it does. It just lists everything out. And what I do is in my book, I take that one line and I say, oh, they mean confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Here's how you could do that. You need a security policy to do that, right? And then what I'll do is also reference it with other ISO 27001 documentation, like ISO 27000, ISO 27000, 2000, ISO 27002 is actually the security controls, which breaks down all the stuff that you're supposed to have in your organization. But ISO 27001 doesn't go into those details. It's like a policy. It's like an overarching policy, and it's just telling you an organization will do A, B, and C. A, B, C, and A, B, C, D, and E. Whatever, and it'll just go down and list them, and then go off to the next chapter. That's why it's so fast. Somebody asked me. Oh, okay. William says, can we use ChatGPT to write a user agreement for us or an SOP to show us the outline for practice? Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea, actually. You could totally come up with some idea of how it works and how it's supposed to look with ChatGPT. And this is something I actually did a whole book about how I was using it. I can briefly explain how a really good way to use it. So what you do, William, is you'll go to Google before you go to ChatGPT. Go to Google and type in the SOP. Let's say you were doing a user agreement. Great example. Type in user agreement dot PDF or user agreement dot doc, right? Find an actual user agreement that fits your industry, because each industry has a slightly different user agreement. There's different user agreements for different things. So if you needed to do one, for example, for the healthcare industry, you might want to do, maybe you had a user agreement for new users coming in. So you want to be very specific about a user agreement for IT professionals in the healthcare industry, and find some kind of template for that, right? Because there's user agreements for if you have an iPhone, or you have a user agreement for if you're going to use this website, or you have a user agreement, but you got to be very specific with the type of user agreement you want. So you probably want one for employees who are going to use your network. You want that kind of user agreement, and they have tons of them. At the SANS, the SANS, ISACA SANS. Let me see if I can find it for you. Not ISACA. It's SANS organization has a huge library of templates that you can use. A whole bunch of templates, including what we're talking about right now. Sans.org. Hold on. Yeah, sans.org. On this site, somewhere on this site. No. Hold on. This is San Diego Airport. Hold on. Give me a second here. Sans.org. Sans.org. I'm going to show you guys what I mean right here. This site right here, these people have a really good repository for documentation. They have a bunch of templates. Yeah, check this out. Check this out. So sans.org, let me just give you the link here if I can. It's called sans.org/information security policy. And this one has all kinds of policies and templates you can use. So anyway, get the template you need from a reputable site or an organization who's already done it that's in align with what you're trying to do. You said a user agreement. Take that document. Once you find one or two that are like, yeah, this is it. This is kind of what I need. Upload it into Chat GPT or into Gemini on Google's Gemini. That one's okay too. Upload it there and then ask Chat GPT, what can I do to make this document better? It will read what you uploaded and it will make improvements on that. You can do this with a standard operating procedure. You can do this on a acquisition assessment policy, on an antivirus guide, on whatever document, on whatever policy to give you some idea of what it's supposed to look like. And all you're trying to do, keep in mind, you're not going to use this word for word, right? Not in your organization. All you're trying to do is get some idea what it's supposed to look like, because you're going to have to take that template and you're going to have to tailor it to your organization's needs. So that's what you could do. Now, I haven't had to do this because my organization has a bunch of templates that they have already. Like we have a whole bunch of old ones. So I can take those old ones and I could just say, okay, we've updated this software, or we don't use these kind of operating systems anymore. Let's upgrade this. Or, now we have this many users. Let's change this part, So that's really your best course of action, is use the old legacy documents you had before for the content and then just update it. That's better. But if you have absolutely nothing, you can use this repository at sans.org/information security policy. This is a long ass URL, but I just put the link in there for you. And then come up with those templates, and then you can use ChatGPT or some artificial intelligence to improve that, and then tailor it further. Take it for yourself and then tailor it to your organization's needs. And Sam said, thank you so much. Does CIS have a repository for documentation? I'm not sure if CISA does. I know there's some big organizations. I know the NIST, who used to have one? The DoD used to have a pretty good repository. DISA, I don't know if they do anymore. I'm not sure, but NSA used to have a pretty good one for security documents. The ones that still do is sans.org, sans.org. They have this repository is really good. They also, another one is NIST 800. I'm sorry, NIST 800. NIST.gov still has a really good repository that people don't talk about, but they have really good documents, formats, and spreadsheets, and all kinds of stuff for you. Another organization that has them is the CISV8 documentation. Type that in. That's another really great repository for downloadables. Another one is FedRAMP.gov. They have really good repository, especially for like SARS and SAPS, security assessment reports, security assessment plans. They got system security plans, all kinds of great downloadables on there. And then also you can just go to my site, convocourses.com. I have like a downloadable that I've already like scraped the internet and said, okay, this one's good. Nope, this one sucks. This one's good. I've used this before, something like this. And then I put it on one thing. It's free to download it. And then, it's a zipped file. Okay, let me see. I got some more questions here. I got a degree in cybersecurity and want to get into sales side. Yeah, that's great. I think that's awesome. Sales is really cool, especially get into the right organization. And sometimes they give you a percentage of the sales. That's not bad at all. They'll have you learn the actual software solution really well, and then you go out and you try to convince people to buy it or to upgrade their package or something. Big Gay Mike says, if the leaders won't push security, if the leaders won't push that security culture or pay the cost, you won't get cybersecurity. Amen. So this is a man who knows what the hell he's talking. Big Gay Mike, man, you never cease. Like, you always impress me with your knowledge, man. That's exactly right. If you don't have support, if you don't have, I've been in organizations where I didn't have support from leadership. They kind of just told us, hey, make sure they're following this policy, and hey, everybody must sign this document. I mean, just to sign something, make sure everybody does this. But they tell me to put out the email to do it, right? Whatever it is. And then I do it. I put out this email, and they either ignore me or they say, hey, what is this? What? And they start asking me all these questions. Say, what is this? What am I doing this for? Why are we doing this? What's going on? And they just ask me a bunch of questions that waste my time, waste their time. And it's like they don't want to do it. So their response is to just keep asking me questions. And because their time is valuable, right? They don't want to just do some random stuff because I told them to. But if leadership buys in, it's a whole different story. Especially if it's leadership is the one sending out that mandatory email of whatever they're supposed to do. Then they're like, look, you could just say, hey, listen, it's not me that's telling you to do this. I don't want to do it either. It's coming from the CISO. So we got to get this done in this amount of time. Then you can tell them what time frame to get it done. You don't even have to tell them. You're not the one telling them to do it. You're just saying, hey, we need to do it by this time frame. But if it comes from upper leadership, man, shit gets done. Right. But if it's coming from some random fucking security guy, they don't care. Like, who are you? Like, why are you telling me that you already told me to put all X, Y, and Z patches on the system? We spent a week doing that. Now you want us to do this other stuff? It gets pretty contentious if you don't have backing from security. I mean, from the leadership, then it's hard. How valuable are degrees in cybersecurity industry? I'm currently majoring in computer science with a concentration in cybersecurity. And Big Gay Mike says degrees help, but experience is key. Yes, that I agree. Yes, I totally agree with what Big Gay Mike says. Like, a degree is going to help you. I know that there's this push to get degrees kind of like down, and what's happening is degrees are being, I don't want to say devalued, but they don't go as far as they used to. And I get that. I get why people don't want to spend the money. The university costs keep going up, and I don't think universities get what they're doing. They're kind of, the prices have gone up so high with tuition and with books, that people are starting to like rebel. Like, people are not, especially Gen Z, are not trying to do college, man. They're not trying to hear that shit. It's too expensive. Life is already too expensive. They can't afford houses. It's just the cost of living in the US is just getting too much. And now you want to add some degree on that I'm going to have to work at a coffee shop to pay back the tuition for 15 years. Like, listen, I get it. Like, that's crazy. But however, it's very competitively, it's going to help you out. So you're working, doing your cybersecurity. I mean, doing your degree, your computer science degree is not in vain, especially if you're trying to go be an engineer. You're trying to do this for many years. It's not in vain. It will make you very competitive in the market, but ultimately, your main goal, and this is something people do not talk about for our field, is experience. That's really what they're looking for. So, what I would advise you to do if you are a student, I would say this is in most fields, but especially in information technology. If you are a student right now, you're about to get your degree, or you just got it or read it, whatever, don't wait until you get your degree. Don't wait till you get that piece of paper. Right now, start looking for ways that you can get experience. Right now. whether you get that experience at the current job you work in, to get IT experience, right? Fixing computers. This thing broke and you fixed it. You want stuff you could put on a resume, stuff you can tell an employer, stuff you could just walk in the door and you've already done it 100 times, so you know how to do it. You got to get that experience. And if you can do it for an organization where something was at stake, that's best. But if you could do it even with a project or on your own, or you want the skills, right? You want those skills so that you can be able to walk in with confidence or into an interview and say, "Yep, I know how to scan. I've been doing it for 3 years. The main scanners that I've used is Qualys and Nessus. Here's what we normally would do with these scanners. I know how to set up a policy for it. I know how to put pools of IPs together. I know how to set up a network. Here's how I did it in the past for an employer. Here's how I did it for my school. Here's how I did it for my church. Here's how I did it for the local community. Here's how I set up this or that network." The skills is the most important thing to have. You absolutely need to have the skills in place. Because the degree is great. I would if you are, man, it's going to make you extremely competitive. It's going to open up a few more doors, a bunch of networking doors. You can actually do internships. You can actually do apprenticeships. You got to use that stuff. You got to take advantage of all those opportunities that they give you while you're in school. As a student, like, you get all kinds of perks as a student, but if you don't use them, right? If you don't take advantage of them, then you just lost those things. You didn't use it, so you lost it. Use as many of those perks as you can, because they're going to offer you. They're going to say, "Hey, we've got this club here at this computer. You want to join us? And we have this project to do rogue APs on the network. We're going to test it out. We got this project where we're going to help this company build their network or firewall. We got this project to do pen testing. We're gonna go to Black Hat or DEF CON, and we're gonna be a team, and we're gonna try to hack some stuff. We want to, whatever it is, like, get yourself involved with those. Those are things that you can put on your resume. Hey, I went to DEF CON. We were part of a Capture the Flag thing. We came in 3rd place. Here's the tools we used, right? Those are the kinds they want you. You have to have as much hands-on as you can. Is going to really help you out. Those are the things you can put on your resume. Those are very, very powerful things that you can use. Let me see. Trying to read regs is so infuriating. Yes, I agree. I have to reread it 15 times. No joke. Yeah, me too, man. It does not make sense. One thing you can do, like a cool trick, is to use ChatGPT to understand it. What you do is you take the reg or the legislation, you upload it into ChatGPT and say, "Explain like I'm 5. What does this mean?" And it'll explain it in a whole different way. You could upload some confusing text and be like, "Read this in the voice of Abraham Lincoln," and it'll do it. It's so freaking cool, man. Where do we purchase the book? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. So if you happen to be on TikTok, if it's still around when you see this, you can go into the link in description, and you can go to convocourses.net, and you have you got free books, free downloadables. You've got this book at discounted 99 cents for a limited time, FISMA compliance. And what I'm looking for is reviews, positive reviews about the book. It really helps me out as an author, as a publisher. It's a huge help to me that you guys have been supporting me, and I really appreciate what you guys have already done. I've already had so much help from this community, so I really appreciate that. It's made my dreams come true of being an actual writer who's making an income from writing, from putting stuff together. So I really appreciate people who've already purchased it, who's already taken advantage of these discounts. Everything that you do helps me out. Even if you just go ahead and get it and you don't review it, like, Amazon will see that somebody got it, and then even if it's free, like they see that you downloaded it, and then that kind of gives me like it's almost like a thumbs up whenever that happens. So I really appreciate everything, all the support that I've gotten so far. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Lily says, do you have a contact email? I think, Lily, you've already sent me an email, and I apologize that I haven't gotten back to you on your question. I get a lot of emails. Do you have a contact? So it's contact@convocourses.com. And that is the best way to contact me. Now, keep in mind, I do get a lot of people contact me, but there's my contact information right there. If you happen to be watching me on YouTube, I think Lily's question was something about common controls and inheriting controls, if I'm not mistaken. Common controls. Let me see if I can find that email. Sometimes, like, what'll happen is somebody will email me, and I have an answer, but it's not a yes or no, right? It's going to take me time to explain it, and it's a 30-minute email. So sometimes I don't have 30 minutes. You know what does that make sense? Like, I'll have a 30-minute answer, but I don't have 30 minutes to spare. So that's what happens sometimes with the emails. I'm like, okay, I can answer. Like, somebody asked me an OWASP question. I've got it more than once. And I'm like, okay, well, this one right here, I want to spend some time on. And so by the time I get to it, it's like months later that I got to the question. But somebody else has asked me 15 times about it, so that's why I got to it. William says, have you used McAfee's EPO suite for GRC? I used to use a little bit of, we called it HBSS. The government had a contract with Mac. I don't know if they still do. I don't think they do anymore. It's something else now, I think. But they had something called HBSS, host-based security something. And their implementation for HBSS, for host-based security, was McAfee EPO suite that they implemented across all their systems. And at the time, I wasn't doing GRC. I was doing cybersecurity analysis work. And the way that they would use it for GRC is in GRC for compliance, the C is the compliance, like governance, risk, and compliance. So you would use it for actually all of those. So you would use it to govern. You'd use it to manage or govern the endpoint devices. And then, of course, some of the documentation would point to that as the solution, McAfee EPO, that endpoint solution that was on those individual workstations. And then the risk portion, it was very important because it helped to manage the risk to each individual system. So whenever we have scans done on a weekly, a monthly basis, whatever it was, you could see that those systems were being protected. And if we had a big assessment, we'd be able to say, yeah, here's how we're managing the security on these systems. It's minimizing the risk to every individual workstation. And then for compliance, this is a big one. Compliance, you'd be able to point back whenever you're doing documentation to say, okay, how is this compliant? You could say, hey, you could point to EPO as our solution to protect all of those systems, whether it was doing data loss prevention, or if it was had that firewall that you could turn on to protect the inbound and outbound traffic, monitoring the traffic. It did several things. Like it can monitor the traffic and then send that to a SIEM device that we could monitor. We could track all of that information and see what was blocked, and what had some level of risk, and that solution would have, I believe it had its own severity code to say, okay, this traffic is high risk, this traffic is low risk, this traffic, it would just flat out block some traffic. So that actually helped with compliance and risk. So it was a big part of GRC. Like, it's a great solution. It's not for small environments because it's expensive, but for medium and large organizations that have sensitive data, yeah, man, that's a great tool. And yeah, some William said yes, that's HBSS. So they still use EPO, I guess, huh? Let me see. Let me see here. Lisa, hey, how you doing? Hey, I showed the people some of the book that's being done. Lisa's been helping me to go through some of the content on that book. So I appreciate your help. Thanks so much for that, for your help on that one. I'm still working through some of the comments you put on there. Let me see if I got some more comments on TikTok. And I got a hard stop, guys, at around 2 o'clock. I'm gonna end this. We're gonna go watch some movies. We're gonna go watch Dune 2. Where can we purchase the book? Okay, I already answered that one. And if you go to Amazon, like, speaking of purchasing the book, it's going to be in convocourses.net. Go there and it'll have all the discounts and all the free downloadables. But if you actually just go to amazon.com and type in Bruce Brown Combo Courses, you'll find some of the books. If you just go to Google and type it, you'll see some of the books as well. So it's out there. Can you elaborate on federal documents that you had to read for the NIST or other documents? Okay, I think I already answered this one, but I can add to this. So recently, the documents that I've had to read for my job, outside of actually writing books, for my job, it'll be if I'm working for the Department of Agriculture, right? I will have to read their security policy. So they'll have a local security policy, and I've got to read that thing like it's the Bible. Like, I have to refer to it quite a bit, and I have to read through it and understand it. And then they'll have other documents that are associated with it, procedures and all kinds of other things. And I got to read those things. And the reason why those are all tied back to the NIST documentation. And sometimes I have to cross-reference, okay, what does the NIST 853 say, and how does our document align with the NIST 53 control AC-2 or whatever it is. So that's how in-depth I have to be. So I'm always reading those types of doc. I have to, especially like during when we're going through compliance or something like that, or some kind of assessment, and we got to go through each one. I have to read the NIST 853. I have to read the NIST 837. NIST 853. That one right now, I'm super deep in that one. I'm always referencing it. Another one would be, not too often am I reading the actual FSMA documentation, but it's good to understand. It's good to understand the why behind the NIST 800, but the NIST 853, I'm like really in the weeds on that one. That's probably the main one right now that I'm reading that I have to reference. But every now and then, it's going to be the actual local, like if I'm working for the Department of the DEA or whatever it is, they'll have their own local security policy, and I'll have to read through theirs. And theirs is referencing the NIST 800. Happy Saturday, Bruce. Happy Saturday indeed. Dev says, I'm an operations support engineer. How do I pivot out of this to make a bag? Operations support engineer. So I don't really know what that is. If I knew more about what you do, I could tell you specifically how to pivot. But operations support engineers. Is that like a help desk type? Operations support. So in my field, that usually means that's usually somebody who's they're not super technical as far as fixing computers. It's more about the actual mission or business application and what procedures you're supposed to do for that job, whatever you're doing. Is that I'm not sure if that's what you do, but I would say, I mean, really depends on your probably become a manager. I mean, usually managers make significantly more, and that's a hard road to travel because the first thing you're probably going to have to do is be a supervisor. But on your way there, like give yourself like a 2 year, 3 year goal to do it and become a manager, and you're going to make probably 15 to 20% more doing management type stuff, whatever job you're doing. Usually, and if they don't pay you that, leave. Like as a manager, if they don't pay you more, then get the hell out of there. Um, I don't. I'd have to know more specifics about your job to give you a better advice. Can you recommend certification for cloud? I already answered that one, I think. Um, WGU, congrats. My job has working for ISO and ISO. Is that right? I'm the only person. So are you okay? If I'm understanding your statement, you said your job has you working as an ISO and an ISSM, or for an ISSM, an information system security manager and an information system security officer. Um, it usually you have some upper level person. Do you have like some upper level manager who's making the calls? Because if so, that's kind of more like an ice, and it might be that you're doing ISO work, but it's more like expanded where you have more responsibilities, but you answer to somebody else and they're the ones making the final call. Because that's kind of what I'm doing. So what I'm doing right now is almost like an information security manager, but I'm not the one making the final calls on big decisions. So I'm kind of in the same position you're in. There's somebody above me. I'm doing most of the work. That's for because this dude's up here and he's managing a bunch of us, a bunch of people who do the same thing I do. So that guy is really he's the real information system security manager. But we're doing the work that he can't possibly do all the work we're doing. We're the contractors, he's the government guy, and then we're doing that work. And we're making calls and stuff like that, but he's the one who makes the final decision on big things. So he is, even though we're doing the work, he's actually the information system. Is it something like that? Is it right? What happens in this role? I can just tell you my own personal experience is that some of us have bigger systems than others. So what's happening is it's too much work. And I've told them this several times without going into great detail about what I actually do or who I work for. But that's the problem with that, is that when you do kind of dual hatted and you're doing a lot of the work that an ISO and an ISM would do, or you're wearing several hats or whatever, it's just too much work. Like it's overwhelming and it gets very stressful, and it's not fun. It's not fun, and I'm constantly, to be honest with you, looking through emails to see if there's a better opportunity. I mean, that's the problem with it. Is it right? I don't think it's wrong, but it's just after a while, it's just too much work. Because I, like you, I mean, there's one other person that's helping, but it's really just too much work. And then they panic. But what makes it worse is some things they're panicking about, like, oh, why isn't this done? It's like, do you know how much work I have to do? Like, I can only do what I can do, guys. Like, you know, that's one of the most stressful things about this, about where I'm at work right now. And it's happened more than once, so it's very frustrating. Shifting from compliance to engineering, I feel like I got stuck in compliance, 5 years of compliance. You know, that happened to me a while ago, and I got bored with it because I just been doing it so long. And then I got at what I did was I shifted gears and I started doing cybersecurity analysis work, which was fun for a while. But there's a couple things. I had to do shift work because I was working on a SOC. Um, it was it was rewarding, intellectually rewarding, but I make more money as a compliance guy doing less work, to be honest. Um, so I would advise you to do the same thing. Like, go try something else. Like, put your resume in to focus on another work to get more, more excitement. And shifting from compliance to engineering, I feel like I got stuck doing. Yeah, try engineering for some time. That's what I did. I shifted to analyst work, and actually, it was fun. I learned a lot of different things. I learned all these different tools. It was great, but ultimately, I went back to compliance because it pays better. It's just, I'm more comfortable with it. Try something else. Maybe you'll like engineering. Maybe somebody else, maybe they get into an analysis work and then they wouldn't have left. For me, I went into, it was fun, but there's more money in compliance for me. And I only got a couple questions left. I got one, I think one question left because it's almost 2 o'clock. Let me see. I just got a Google certification and I'm working through AWS. Working on an AWS through Coursera. That's great. AWS is fire. I am Is a computer science degree still worth it with AI layoffs? Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Um, there's just a shift in. This is just my 2 cents. I think what's happening is there's just a big shift that's happening in the FANG area. Like, the stuff you're hearing about is mostly from FANG. FANG is Facebook or Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And you hear mostly about those guys because those are the leaders on the S&P 500. So they're on CNN and on Fox News Business and on MSNBC Business or whatever. Everybody talks about them, but what they don't talk about is the majority of the industry is not FANG. It's in the government, it's in healthcare, it's in critical infrastructure, and we still need people. And actually, the jobs there have not been filled. But what you see, it's kind of like it's kind of like a blind. People are blinded because they'll watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC, and those guys are very like this. They only talk about FANG. They only talk about what's on the S&P 500. They don't talk about like everything. I'm in this field. I've been working for the government. I've worked for the government. I've worked for the healthcare industry. I've worked for the manufacturing industry. And I can tell you, we do not have enough people doing this work. We cannot find enough people. We cannot get enough people in. And that's why people like myself and somebody else who just talked, we have too many hats. Like, we don't have enough people doing this work. There's just not enough people. It's so bad that a lot of times most of the people I work, 50% of the people I work for are immigrants. They have an accent. They know more than one language, and they're probably, they're first generation American. And most of the people I work for are people who are immigrants who see this as a great opportunity. And because Americans don't see it, all they see is Fox News and freaking CNN, and those guys are like, oh, FANG, 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 and layoffs and layoffs and layoffs. No, that's not all that there is. There's the federal government. There's critical infrastructure. There's healthcare. We need more people. I'm telling you, the last 5 jobs I've had, I'm doing multiple jobs. I'm doing vulnerability management. I'm doing cybersecurity, threat intelligence. They got me doing 15 different things. And that's cool because I get to learn, but I don't have the time to do that shit. It's ridiculous. All right, guys. I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I got to go watch Dune Part 2. I'll see you guys next week or maybe tomorrow. Hopefully I could do one tomorrow. I don't know. But anyway, thanks so much. Thank you, William Draper. Great questions. Thanks, Lisa, for all your help. Appreciate you. Thank you, every Big Gay Mike, my man Big Gay Mike's on here, who's very knowledgeable, and everybody else, Kirk Jr., everyone. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for your questions. I'm out of here. Out of here. Out of here. Oh wow, it's had some questions on freaking Instagram. Look into internship program. Oh man, that's crazy, huh? Yep.
Why you never see the questions in the YouTube and the stuff?